I'm going to show how I knit a heel flap and turn the heel and pick up for the gusset and work the gusset all on a top-down sock. So this is all going to be part of the heel turn. I'm just making a mini sock and it's going to be like an anklet because I don't have a whole lot of fabric here, but that is just fine. So I paused one stitch before the end of my round, so I'm going to knit that one. At this point I don't need the marker for a little while, that can get set aside. And what I want to do is arrange my stitches so I've got half of the stitches ready to go all on one needle. So starting at the next stitches I would be knitting. I have a total of 24, so I'm going to want to put 12 on here. So there's 4. And I'm just going to slip these purlwise. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And that happens to be perfectly what I have. Leaving all these stitches over here just hanging out, and just for my own comfort, I'm going to move a couple more of these around so I've got 6 on each of these 2 needles. Now these 2 needles that each have a quarter of my stitches, or 6, are just going to hang out for a while. I will eventually get back to them, but I've got quite a few steps before I do. For now I'm going to be working on this half of my stitches. So the heel flap is worked back and forth, so we'll be knitting and purling. We'll also be doing some slip stitches, both on the edge to make it easier to pick up for the gusset, and in the middle of the row for kind of a denser heel that is longer wearing and fits a little better. So row 1, which is a right side row, I'm going to slip 1 stitch knitwise with the yarn in the back of the work, and then I'm going to knit 1. And then I'm going to slip 1 purlwise with the back of the work, and knit 1. And that's my repeat. Slip 1 purlwise with the yarn and back, knit 1, slip 1 purlwise with the yarn and back, knit 1 all the way across my row, and I should end up with a knit 1. That's a good sign. Now I'm not going to continue in the round. Instead I'm going to turn the work and go back on this same needle. Row 2 is my wrong side row. I'm going to slip the first stitch purlwise with the yarn in front, and then I just purl all the way to the end. So on row 2 I'm only slipping the very first stitch. Now I'm going to repeat these 2 rows 5 more times, which is a total of 12 rows, and that matches the number of stitches I had on my needle. So again, row 1, first stitch I slip knitwise with the yarn and back, and then my repeat is to knit 1 and slip 1 purlwise with the yarn and back. So knit 1, slip 1, knit 1, slip 1. I'm going to kind of go at my normal speed. Feel free to pause if you're trying to keep up with me. Okay, row 2 again, this is the second repeat, so slip 1 purlwise with the yarn and back, and then just purl to the end. And then we do it again. So I really like this slip stitch heel again because it is very sturdy. It also just sort of creates a almost like a little corrugation, not quite up to a rib, but similar. So it makes it stretchy, but cup in and kind of hold nice and snug to the heel. So I find that it fits comfortably. And for me, where I usually wear out my socks is at the back of the heel. So adding in that extra strength is a really good thing. You can also work in a carry-along thread. And those are often packaged as very thin wool nylon blends that you just get a little bit of on a card. Or you could carry along a lace weight silk or a lace weight mohair, which are also very nice and strong if you like to if you prefer to avoid nylon and other synthetics. So here we go. Now at some point you're likely to lose track of how many times you've done this. And you can count these big V's. When you slip the stitches, you get this big old V here, it kind of stretches out. So this is our first repeat of 2 rows, second repeat of 2 rows, third repeat, and then I'm in the middle of the 4th one because I've only done row 1 so far. So I'll have 2 more of these to go. The other place you can count your big V's is on the edge. This is what we'll be picking up later on. So you can see here you got 1, 2, 3, 4. So 2 more repeats. last time through. There's my row 1. And final row of my heel flap is a row 2 or wrong side row. Alright, so you can see I've gotten pretty far away from these other needles that are hanging out and holding my stitches. And my heel flap is complete. This goes down along the back of the heel. And now we're getting to where it's going to be touching the ground. Now it's time for the really fun part, which is turning the heel. And to turn the heel, I'm going to be working some shorter rows and doing some decreases. So to start out, I'm going to knit 8 of my stitches, which gets me a little bit past the center line. And what you might like to do is when you get to the center, which in my case is 6, you could put a marker on, just to keep track of your symmetry. So I'm going to go 2 past the center, and then I am going to knit the next 2 together. And then I'm going to turn my work around. There are 2 stitches over here that have not been worked. They haven't been knit or purled, and that is totally appropriate for what we're doing. I'm going to turn it around. Row 2, I'm going to slip the first stitch purlwise with the yarn in front, and then I'm going to purl 4. So purling 2 of those gets me to my marker. We'll move my marker. I'll purl 2 more, and then I'm going to purl 2 together. And now I'm going to turn my work around again, just like last row. I've got 2 stitches left unworked on this side. Now I've got row 3. I'm going to slip the first stitch purlwise with the yarn in back. I'm going to knit to 1 stitch before the gap. And sometimes people think they'll have trouble finding the gap, but when you get there, it's pretty easy to tell. So here I am, I've got this big old space on my needle. I'm 1 stitch before the gap, and now I'm going to knit 2 together. And from here on out, whenever we do our 2 togethers, they're going to be the stitch before and after the gap, which closes the gap. And then I'm going to turn the work around. There's 1 stitch left unworked over here. And row 4, I'm going to slip a stitch purlwise, and I'm going to purl till I'm 1 stitch before the gap. There's my marker. And the marker there is optional, but if you're somebody who likes another way to check, that can be helpful. So here I'm 1 stitch before the gap. I'm going to purl 2 together over the gap, turn the work around, 1 stitch is remaining. And we're going to do that whole thing. These last 2 rows we're going to repeat 1 more time. So I'm going to slip 1, purlwise with the yarn in back. I'm going to knit till I'm 1 before the gap. There we go. We're going to knit those 2 together. Then I'm going to turn the work around, slip the first stitch purlwise, purl till I'm 1 before the gap. Here we go, purl 2 together, and we are done. So I put my marker in the center before, and now I've got equal number of stitches on each side of it. We're down to 3 stitches on each side, or 6 total. So I've got half the stitches I had before. Now, to start the gusset, I'm going to now slip the first stitch of this row and just knit across. And we're going to keep that marker in there because it might be useful. Now, using this same needle, I'm going to put my spare one away. I'm going to pick up 6 stitches along the edge of the gusset. And you can see you might need to unroll this. We've got these big V's here. And I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them. So they're all set up ready for me to go. So I'm going to put my needle in underneath the first V, both strands of it, catch the yarn and pull up a loop. And if you hold the yarn like this in your left hand, it might be helpful to kind of grab one with your right hand here. I'll switch hands for the other side so you can see it with the yarn in the right hand or throwing. So we're going to pick up each V, scoop up a stitch. Now, sometimes people get a gap up here when they do the very final V. So you can go here in the V, or you can kind of scooch up a little higher, or even dig a little deeper. It's okay to try something. And if you get a big hole like that, try something else. Sometimes I even get a little sneaky, and I'll take a strand from one row and then go up and get the V from the next row. Exactly where you go doesn't matter so much as that it looks good, and you can see that looks a whole lot better. So I had 3 on this needle. Oh, actually, this is why it's good to have my marker. So I had 6 on the needle, 3 after the marker. I've only picked up 5 here. So let's undo that and redo it and get 5, and then get my sneaky one for number 6. Good lesson to always double check. I tend to make more mistakes when I'm demonstrating because I'm not paying as much attention to my own work. So that needle's done. I'm going to pick up my empty needle and knit across all of these reserve stitches. I could combine them onto one needle in the beginning, or I could just do it when I get to it. Whatever works. But we want all of these onto one needle here. And then we're going to be picking up on the other side, and as promised, I'm going to switch and hold the yarn in my right hand so you can see how that looks because the mechanics are a little different. So again, really unroll this edge, and you've got here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of those big V's. And I might do a little fancy business here at the top just to try to avoid having an extra or having a bit of a hole. So I'm grabbing an extra strand from somewhere nearby, and that'll help keep it together. And again, try it. That didn't work. I've got a hole here. So we're going to try it somewhere slightly different and maybe catch part of this neighboring V and then go under this nice big V here. Precision doesn't matter quite so much here as having it look good. So I was picking up 1, 2. Be careful you don't pull too tight, or if you do, pull tight to get through to loosen up afterwards. 3, 4, 5, and 6. Now before I introduce my empty needle that's hanging out over here, I'm going to go ahead and knit 3 from this needle, the first one. And the reason I'm doing that is because at this point in my sock, it's very important to have the stitches lined up in the right way because I'll be working some gusset decreases based on which needle I'm on. So here we are, we're going in the round. Here's my beginning of the round right where I am right now. This is called needle number 1. We're going to be decreasing at the end of needle number 1. We're going to be working even, no increase or decrease across needle 2. This is needle 3, and I'm going to be decreasing at the beginning of it. So basically I'm decreasing here, and that's going to shape the gusset of my sock. And we'll be doing the decreasing every other round, starting with this very next round. So round 1 is our decrease round. I'm going to start by knitting until I'm at the last 3 stitches on needle number 1, which doesn't take long because I don't have a whole lot of stitches. Currently I've got 9 stitches each on needle 1 and 3. We're going to bring that back down to 6 where it used to be. So 3 stitches remaining. I'm going to do knit 2 together and then knit 1 more. Needle number 2 always stays the same. It has 12. We want it to keep 12, which is half our original total. So I'm just going to knit across needle number 2, which is along the top of the foot here. In needle number 3, I'm going to decrease at the beginning. So at the very beginning of needle number 3, I'm going to knit 1 stitch. Then I'm going to do an SSK decrease, which is a left-leaning decrease as opposed to the right-leaning decrease of a knit 2 together, which we did on the other side. So there are a couple ways to do this. What I like to do is slip 1 stitch knitwise, slip the 2nd stitch purlwise, and then my left needle goes in through the front of those stitches and I knit them together. So you can see it's got a bit of a left lean to it. And then I'm going to knit to the end of needle 3, which is also the end of my round. If you want to, you can put a little clippy marker here, but I find it's pretty easy to tell where that is because it's the bottom of the heel and looks very different than every other needle. Now we have round 2, which is just plain knit. And incidentally, I'm just using some leftover yarn from a different project. This was a thicker yarn. It's like a DK weight, which is nice that I can see what I'm doing and you can see what I'm doing. It's a nice way to learn a technique to use bigger yarn, bigger needles, and do a smaller version of it, like this little mini sock. It's also kind of a fun way to use up leftover yarns. All right, so that was my round 2. I'm back at my beginning. And now I'm going to repeat rounds 1 through 2 twice more because I want to get back down to the 24 stitches total. So this is my decrease round or round 1. Starting with needle number 1, I'm going to knit until 3 stitches remain. I'm going to knit 2 together and then knit 1. I'm just going to knit across needle number 2. And then needle number 3, I'm going to knit 1 and then do my SSK, which again I do slip 1 knitwise, slip 1 purlwise, left needle goes into the front of those stitches, and then you knit them together. And then I knit to the end of needle 3, which is also the end of my round. Now I get to do round 2, which is my easy just knit round. Alright, so we've got one more repeat of rounds 1 and 2. And if you lose track, you can count your stitches. On needle 1 and 3, I currently have 7, and I need to get it back down to 6, so that tells me I have to do one more time. So I'm going to knit on needle 1 till 3 stitches remain, knit 2 together, knit the last one, knit across needle 2, and on needle 3 I'm going to knit 1, and then do my SSK, slip knitwise, slip purlwise, left needle goes into the front, and we knit those together, and then knit to the end. Alright, and since my repeat said repeat rounds 1 and 2, I'm going to go ahead and do round 2, and that'll also make it easier for you to see what I've just created. So I find this a pretty exciting part of the sock because it starts actually looking like it might be a sock now that we have the heel and the gusset showing the direction change. So it is when it all starts looking like it's working to me. Okay, so here we are at the end of round 2. And you can see I am back to my original number of stitches. So I've got half the stitches here on needle 2, a quarter each on needles 1 and 3. And from the cuff of the sock, we've done our heel flap, we've done our heel turn, and then we've just done this gusset which narrows it in. And now I'm ready just to knit around till it's time to shape the toe, and I'll have a separate video on that.